All right, welcome back, everyone, for part 2 of our deep dive into what different religions believe happens after death.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating one.
In part 1, we journeyed through some major world religions,
Mm-hmm.
and you might remember that a lot of them,
Right?
death wasn't really seen as the end,
Yeah.
but more of a transition to something new.
Exactly.
And now we're shifting our focus to the East.
Okay.
We're going to be looking at the intricate world of dharmic religions.
Sounds good.
So that's Hinduism, Sikhism, and Buddhism.
Mm-hmm.
Get ready to explore their views on the afterlife, which are all pretty interconnected.
Yeah.
They offer, I think, a really unique perspective on life, death, and everything in between.
Yeah, and what's fascinating about these traditions is that they all share this concept of samsara.
Samsara.
Yeah, it's basically the cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth.
Okay.
Imagine it like a giant cosmic wheel that just keeps turning, with souls taking a ride, experiencing different lifetimes along the way.
Okay, so like reincarnation.
Well, yeah, sort of, but
Mm.
it's not just a random ride, you know?
What do you mean?
These religions believe that what drives this cycle, what determines the nature of each rebirth, is the concept of karma.
Karma. Yeah, I think most people have heard that word.
Right. Yeah.
But it's a little more than just like getting what you deserve, right?
Yeah, it's definitely more nuanced than that.
Okay.
It's really about cause and effect.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that every single action,
Okay.
every thought, every intention
Wow.
leaves this kind of trace, shaping the conditions of your future experiences.
Interesting.
Imagine it like planting seeds, right?
Yep, yep.
The seeds of your actions, they will eventually bear fruit,
Yeah.
either sweet or bitter, depending on what you've sown.
So if I'm getting this right, good deeds would create positive karma,
Exactly.
which leads to a better rebirth. And I guess negative actions would lead to a less pleasant experience?
Precisely. And this principle of karma is super central to both Hinduism and Sikhism.
Okay.
But Sikhism adds another interesting element to it.
Okay, what's that?
The concept of hukam.
Hukam. I haven't heard that one before.
Yeah, so hukam is the belief that everything happens according to God's plan, God's divine plan.
So while karma shapes the landscape of our lives,
Right.
it's all part of this grander design orchestrated by a higher power.
Exactly.
Wow, that's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, if our choices actually matter,
Mm-hmm.
if everything is kind of already part of this divine script.
It's a really profound question,
Yeah.
and these traditions really grapple with it in their own unique ways.
Wow.
But they offer this perspective that embraces both the agency of individual choice,
Mm-hmm.
but also this humbling realization that we're part of something much larger than ourselves.
Okay, so Hindus and Sikhs believe in this cycle of rebirth
Yeah,
driven by karma, and Sikhs add that element of hukam.
right.
But where do Buddhists fit into all of this?
That's a great question.
I know they have some interesting views on the self and rebirth
Yeah, absolutely.
that are kind of different from the other two.
So, while Buddhists acknowledge the cyclical nature of existence and the role of karma,
Okay.
they have a really distinct concept called anatta.
Anatta.
Yeah, often translated as no self.
No self.
It means they don't believe in this permanent, unchanging soul that transmigrates from one life to the next.
Okay, so kind of like what Hindus and Sikhs believe.
Right, exactly.
But Buddhists see it differently.
Yeah, they see consciousness as this constantly changing stream. It's shaped by karma, but without a fixed identity.
So if there's no fixed self in Buddhism,
Right?
what is it that gets reborn?
That's a great question. It's a tough one to wrap your head around.
Yeah, it's a little mind-bending.
It's not a solid, unchanging me that continues,
Okay.
but rather it's this flow of consciousness, a collection of karmic tendencies and potentialities
Oh,
that kind of takes shape in a new life.
so it's not me, but it's kind of like the stuff that makes me, me.
In a way, yeah, it's like a continuation of the process, not of a specific entity.
I see. So they call it rebecoming
Right.
instead of reincarnation.
Exactly, to emphasize that there's no single thing being reborn.
Okay.
It's more like this dynamic process of
Okay.
becoming.
All right. My brain is definitely starting to bend a little bit here, trying to wrap my head around this idea of no self.
It's a big one.
It is, but let's say I'm starting to grasp this concept of samsara
Okay.
and the different beliefs about what continues after death.
Yeah,
Here's a question that pops into my mind.
sure.
If we're all caught up in this endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth,
Right.
what's the point of it all?
That's a good question.
Is there like an escape hatch? A way to break free from this cosmic merry-go-round?
Yeah, that's a question that a lot of these traditions try to answer.
Okay, we'll have to get into that then.
Definitely.
So we're talking about this idea of liberation, breaking free from this cycle of samsara.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It is, and in the last part, we touched upon the ultimate goals in Hinduism, Sikhism, and Buddhism.
Right.
Moksha, mukti, and nirvana.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd love to, dive even deeper into what these states of liberation actually entail.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a question that lies at the heart of these spiritual traditions, right?
Yeah.
And what's so intriguing is that while they all share this goal of liberation from samsara,
Yeah.
their understanding of what liberation looks like and how to achieve it
Right.
really differs in some fascinating ways.
So let's start with Hinduism.
Okay.
What does moksha mean in this context?
Okay, so in Hinduism, moksha represents this ultimate reunion of the Atman.
Atman.
Yeah, the individual soul. You can see the spark of the divine with Brahman, the universal consciousness, the ultimate reality.
Okay.
It's like, imagine a drop of water merging back into the vast ocean,
Okay.
losing its individual identity and becoming one with the infinite.
Wow. That's a powerful image.
It is. It's a state of complete liberation from suffering,
Okay.
ignorance, and this whole cycle of birth and death.
So it's like a homecoming to the source of all being.
Exactly. You could say that.
That's beautiful.
It is.
But how do Hindus actually achieve this moksha?
Right. Good question.
Is there like a single prescribed path or...
Well, what's really beautiful about Hinduism is that it recognizes the diversity of human nature.
Okay.
And it actually offers multiple paths to moksha.
Really?
Yeah, each one kind of catering to different temperaments and inclinations.
That makes sense.
Right. And these paths are known as margas.
Margas.
Yeah, they provide a framework for spiritual practice and self-realization.
So can you walk us through some of these paths and how they differ?
Absolutely. So one path is karma marga,
Karma marga.
the path of selfless action.
Okay.
It's all about performing your duties,
Mm-hmm.
your action,
Okay.
without attachment to the outcome,
Okay.
dedicating your efforts to a higher purpose.
So doing things for the right reasons, not for personal gain.
Exactly. Imagine a doctor serving the sick with complete dedication, not for personal gain or recognition, but out of this deep sense of duty and compassion.
Right.
That's a good example of karma marga in action.
So it's about ethical living, right action as a way to purify the heart and mind?
Exactly. And then there's bhakti marga,
Bhakti marga.
the path of devotion.
Devotion. Okay.
This path emphasizes cultivating love and surrender to a chosen deity.
Okay.
It's about channeling your emotions, that longing for the divine,
Okay.
through practices like chanting, prayer, rituals,
Right.
ultimately seeking that union with the object of your devotion.
So harnessing the power of love and devotion as a driving force for spiritual transformation.
Precisely. And finally, we have Jnana Marga,
Jnana marga.
the path of knowledge.
Knowledge. Okay.
This path emphasizes self-inquiry, contemplation,
Okay.
the pursuit of wisdom through study and meditation.
So using your intellect to try to understand the nature of reality.
Yeah, it's about using your intellect, your reason,
Okay.
to penetrate this veil of illusion and directly realize your true nature as one with Brahman.
It seems like each of these paths offers a really unique approach to achieving that same ultimate goal, liberation.
Right.
And I imagine individuals might even find themselves drawn to different paths at different stages in their lives.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no one-size-fits-all approach to spiritual growth, right?
Right.
The beauty of Hinduism is that it acknowledges that we're all unique individuals
Yeah.
with different strengths, different inclinations.
I like that.
Yeah.
So let's move on to Sikhism's perspective on liberation.
Okay, sounds good.
They call it mukti, right?
Yeah, mukti.
How does that compare to the Hindu concept of moksha?
So mukti in Sikhism also signifies liberation from the cycle of samsara,
Okay.
but its emphasis lies on merging with Waheguru, the
Waheguru.
divine light,
Okay.
like a ray of light merging back into the sun.
I see.
It's about dissolving that sense of separation between the individual soul and the divine source.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And how do Sikhs approach achieving this state of mukti?
So Sikhism really emphasizes living an ethical life,
Okay.
meditating on God's name,
Right.
and engaging in selfless service.
Selfless service.
Yeah, it's known as seva.
Seva.
It's about cultivating a deep connection with Waheguru
Okay.
through devotion, ethical conduct, and service to humanity.
It seems like seva, that selfless service, is a powerful concept.
It is.
It kind of echoes the idea of karma marga in Hinduism,
Right.
that understanding that actions performed without attachment or ego can lead to spiritual purification and ultimately liberation.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful observation. You're right.
There's definitely a common thread running through these traditions.
There is.
This idea that true liberation comes not just from intellectual understanding or mystical experiences, but also from living a life aligned with ethical principles and compassion.
Exactly.
So now let's turn our attention to Buddhism
Okay.
and their concept of nirvana.
Nirvana.
Yeah, it's often translated as extinction
Right.
or blowing out, which
Right.
might sound a little bleak to some.
It can.
But what does nirvana actually signify in Buddhist thought?
So nirvana might sound kind of mysterious,
Yeah.
but it's not about annihilation or escaping from existence.
Okay.
It's more about extinguishing the flames of suffering,
Okay.
the craving, the aversion, the ignorance that keep us bound to that cycle of samsara.
So it's not extinguishing life itself, it's more like extinguishing the negativity within us.
Exactly.
Huh.
And the path to achieving nirvana is outlined in the Buddhist teachings,
Okay.
particularly the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path.
Right, I've heard of those, but can you break those down for us?
Sure.
I know the Eightfold Path sounds pretty comprehensive,
Yeah.
but what are the key principles involved?
Okay, so the Four Noble Truths essentially lay out the Buddha's diagnosis of the human condition.
Right.
The first truth acknowledges that life, inherently involves suffering.
Okay.
The second truth points to the root of that suffering, our attachments, our desires, and our ignorance.
Okay, so the first truth is that there is suffering, and the second truth is why they're suffering.
Exactly.
Okay,
The third truth offers hope that there's a way to end this suffering.
there's a way out.
Yeah. And the fourth truth outlines the path to liberation, which is the Eightfold Path.
So the Four Noble Truths provide the framework,
Yeah,
and the Eightfold Path offers those practical steps to achieve liberation.
precisely. So the Eightfold Path encompasses right understanding,
Okay.
right thought, right speech,
Mm-hmm.
right action, right livelihood,
Okay.
right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration.
Wow, that's quite a list.
It is. It's about cultivating wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline
Okay.
to really purify the mind and heart.
So it's not just about meditating in a cave somewhere.
No, not at all.
It's about living your life in a certain way.
Exactly. It's about integrating these principles into everyday life,
I see.
from the way we think and speak,
Right.
to the way we interact with others,
Okay.
and even how we earn a living.
It's a holistic approach.
It is, absolutely.
And speaking of engaging with the world, let's talk about the bodhisattva ideal.
Ah, yes, the bodhisattva ideal.
It really highlights that importance of compassion.
It really does. It's truly inspiring.
What is a bodhisattva exactly?
So a bodhisattva is an enlightened being
Okay.
who chooses to delay their own full entry into nirvana.
Really?
Yeah, out of compassion for all beings.
Okay.
They vow to help guide others towards enlightenment as well.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is. It's a really profound expression of selfless love
Mm-hmm.
and dedication to the well-being of all.
It's like they've reached the finish line,
Yeah,
but they turn around to help others get there too.
exactly. It's like a teacher who's mastered a subject but continues to teach out of love for their students
Right.
and a desire to share their knowledge.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
It challenges those conventional notions of self-interest, right? And highlights the interconnectedness of all beings.
It makes you realize that your own liberation is tied to the liberation of everyone else.
No.
So these paths to liberation, they seem different,
Right.
but they share a common essence.
Mm-hmm.
It's about transcending the limitations of ego, cultivating compassion,
Right.
and living a life of purpose and meaning
Exactly.
in service to something greater than ourselves.
Yeah, God. And what's fascinating is that these paths, even though they're often presented as distinct,
Yeah.
can actually complement and enrich one another.
How so?
Well, someone on the path of Bhakti Marga, for example,
Right.
might also be drawn to acts of seva,
Okay.
inspired by their love for the divine.
Mm-hmm.
And someone on the path of Jnana Marga might deepen their understanding of interconnectedness
Okay.
through the practice of mindfulness.
So it's less about choosing the right path and more about finding the practices and teachings that resonate with you
Exactly.
and guide you towards that life of greater wisdom, compassion, and ultimately liberation.
Precisely. It's a journey that unfolds throughout our lives,
Yeah.
constantly evolving and revealing new depths of understanding.
As we're exploring all this, I keep thinking about this interplay between karma and free will.
Yeah.
We've talked about how our actions create these karmic traces that influence our future experiences. But it makes me wonder, do we really have a choice in how we live?
It's a great question.
If everything is ultimately governed by karma?
Yeah, it's a question that, philosophers and spiritual seekers have pondered for centuries.
Yeah.
It's complex. This relationship between karma and free will,
It is.
it's often paradoxical.
Yeah, it feels that way.
But it's not about one negating the other.
Okay.
It's more about understanding how they coexist, how they interact.
Okay, so how do these traditions reconcile these seemingly opposing forces?
Right. Well, imagine a river flowing down a mountain.
Okay.
The course of that river, it's shaped by the terrain, right? The rocks and valleys it encounters along the way.
Yeah.
In a similar way, our past karma creates this kind of momentum, a set of predispositions, tendencies that we bring into this life.
So our past actions are like the terrain shaping the flow of our lives.
Exactly.
But where does free will come in?
Good question.
Are we just helplessly swept along?
Not necessarily. Think of a skilled boatman navigating that river.
Okay.
He can't change the course of the river itself.
Right.
But he can use his oars and his knowledge of the currents to steer the boat, to avoid obstacles,
Right.
and ultimately reach his destination.
So it's not about whether we have free will,
Right.
but how we use it within the context of our karmic inheritance.
Exactly. We can't erase the past,
Right.
but we can choose how we respond to the present moment.
Yeah.
How we navigate the challenges and opportunities that come our way.
And this is where hukum comes in, right?
Yeah, in Sikhism, it adds that extra layer.
It suggests that even as we're exercising our free will,
Right.
there's a divine plan unfolding.
Like a grand tapestry being woven.
Wow.
And our individual lives are all part of it.
I can see how that idea could be both comforting and unsettling.
It is.
Comforting that there might be a greater purpose, but also unsettling because it challenges our sense of control.
Exactly. It's a dance between surrender and agency.
Yeah.
Accepting what is and striving for what could be.
It's a lot to think about.
It is. And maybe that's part of the mystery and beauty of life.
Maybe it's not about figuring out all the answers, but more about embracing the unknown, trusting that there's a wisdom at play beyond our understanding.
I like that.
Like that saying, life is a journey, not a destination.
Exactly. And perhaps the journey itself is the ultimate teacher.
Yeah, I think so.
Guiding us towards greater understanding, compassion, and ultimately liberation.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into these dharmic traditions, I'm really struck by the wisdom and insights they offer, not just about the afterlife, but about how to live a more meaningful life right here, right now.
Absolutely. They invite us to look beyond the surface, to explore the depths of our own being, and to recognize that interconnectedness we have with all of existence.
It's a journey that requires courage, humility,
it does,
or willingness to question our assumptions, confront our limitations, and embrace the unknown.
Yeah, it's not always easy.
But the rewards are immeasurable.
We are. A life filled with purpose, compassion, and ultimately freedom from suffering.
So, as we resurface from this deep dive, I'll leave you with this final thought.
Okay.
If, as in Hinduism, orange symbolizes the perfected soul, what colors do you think your actions are adding to your own spiritual journey?
What hues, what shades are you bringing to the canvas of your life?
That's a great question.
And what will your legacy be, not just in the hereafter, but in the hearts and minds of those you touch in this lifetime?
Love that.
May these questions guide you as you continue to explore these concepts and embark on your own unique path of spiritual unfolding.
Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep diving,
Keep questioning,
and keep seeking.